Buddy, you're still here. Give yourself a round of applause. We've made it to the final item on the agenda. We're fully aware that we are all that's standing between you and the poster session. So, all right, I don't have any dancing birds, unfortunately, today, but I did bring some cool cats with me. We're going to talk about the Great Salt Lake Business Council. This is an idea that's been kicking around for about a year, but it's really got off the ground about 6 months ago. So I'm going to just sort of do kind of a high-level overview of what is this business council, what are you guys thinking? And then we actually have a couple of titans of the industry. You guys titans? No, we do have some really great guys. Here's a couple of ski bums wandered in after 3 feet of snow, apparently in Snowbird this week. I'm surprised they're here. But no, seriously, it's great to have them as a couple of members, some founding members of the Business Council. I'm really grateful to have both of them, Josh Brown and Dave Fields, with us today. So, okay, just a little bit about council, what we're going to talk about. We want to talk about, you formed another Great Salt Lake group. Good. We need another one of those, right? So, what's our why? What's the point of doing this? To give you a sense of where we're at 6 months on. And then again, have these two business leaders offer a little bit of perspective about why their respective businesses or industries care about the lake, and then answer any questions you may have. And I don't think we'll use all the time that we've got. Again, I alluded to him before, we've got Josh Brown, who's spent a lot of time at Rio Tinto Kennecott, and is now the Senior Director of Government Relations for Utah Manufacturers Association, so he's very heavily engaged on Utah's Capitol Hill. And then Dave Fields, who's the President General Manager up at Snowbird, Utah, born and bred, I think, for the most part, Dave, and has really been, it was really a conversation with Dave that sort of kicked off, really started to get me thinking about businesses and how businesses engage on Great Salt Lake, because they came to me with a set of questions, and the questions they had were not the ones that I necessarily expected. And so that really got me thinking about businesses and business engagements, and I really appreciate their leadership in this. All right, so I want to strengthen the business voice, a couple of different reasons. I think there's really two goals. We talk about the why of the business council, right? Two things we want to do. One is provide businesses with good information. I've started talking to business leaders, and a lot of times they just don't know where to go for good information. You get information from a lot of different sources. You get it from the media, you get it from various interest groups. But a lot of times businesses, what they really want is access to good information in kind of real time and know what trusted voices they can reach out to. So businesses need good information on the incoming side, and then they also want to know, well, how do I engage, or if I want to engage, how can we engage most effectively, most efficiently, right? Businesses don't have a lot of extra time just to throw around, so these are kind of key considerations for them. But the other thing is, I'm a political animal. I spend a lot of time in the legislature, and so what I think about in terms of politics is how you move. I hate this. It sounds too trite if you say it's like a chess game, but if you think about politics, you have to be able to figure out how to move policy, right? It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. You can't just have a great idea and just instantly make it happen. You have to figure out, how do I get the right political pieces to move to get policy done? If you look at what Utah has accomplished in water law and policy over the past 4 to 5 years, it is unprecedented. Anywhere in the United States, you won't see it. I mean, it's breathtaking how much change has happened and the pace of change, particularly when you talk about water law. It didn't happen by accident, right? It happened because a lot of people have been working behind the scenes for many years to plant the seeds and bring the political sort of pieces together at the right time, right place, right time to make things happen. Now, there's a long way to go when we think about Great Salt Lake. But what's interesting to me is, ask yourself, policymakers on Capitol Hill, here in the state of Utah, who do they listen to? We hope they listen to everybody, right? But who do they really listen to, right? The business community has an outsized voice and an outsized influence on Capitol Hill. Why? Well, they're the job providers, right? In some cases, they're the donors, right? All of this stuff, but all of that really, I mean, if you're a politician, what you want to do is bring home the bacon. You want to show that you're, creating jobs, that you're funding government, right? All of this sort of stuff. And so the business community has really a unique and an outsized influence and voice in the state legislature. And the business engagement on Great Salt Lake has been rather piecemeal, right? So the idea is, hey, we'd like to get the business community to come together in a way where they can help persuade policymakers on important issues, and in a way that the business community is comfortable with. How we might engage might be different from how, say, a business wants to engage. And then the other thing that's really important to me is we just wanted to support existing efforts. We don't want to create a new mouth to feed, if you will, something we go out and we compete with other NGOs or whatever for funding or anything else. We're not trying to build some big political machine here that's going to take a lot of time, money, and energy to move forward. And so that's why it's all done just going here. Together, Zoom calls. All right. So what have we done, what have we done so far? Well, this is just to give you a sense of the groups that have signed up, and I'm really grateful to those folks that sort of stepped out and been willing to do this. We've got 5 trade groups or chambers of commerce, about 25 Utah businesses, but when you start to put them together, we see over 16,000 Utah employees represented and over $6 billion in annual revenue. And there is just a taste of some of the businesses that have said, we want to be part of this. Now, there's a very difficult vetting process, a lot of hoops you have to jump through to be part of the business council. We don't just let anybody in. You have to send me an email that says, Tim, we're a business that cares about Great Salt Lake, and we're okay to be identified as a business that cares about Great Salt Lake. Full stop. That's the difficult vetting process that we have. But no, I really appreciate that really some of these leading businesses in the state of Utah said, hey, count us in. We want to be a part of this. So what have we done so far? Well, 2 Zoom calls. That's sexy, right? Zoom calls. With PowerPoint presentations. But in the course of those Zoom calls, really what we try to do, again, going back to good information, right? We try to introduce business leaders to the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office, for example, to the Great Salt Lake Trust. Again, going back to good information. We want to provide them with good information. If they've got a question, who can they call? Well, the Commissioner's Office is a great place to start. If they're wondering about water, talk to Marcel Shoup, right, about the trust. So we try to introduce them to some good information. We're in the process of working on a statement of principles. This is what the Business Coalition supports. As you might imagine, it's going to be pretty high level. But then a good example of really the first thing that we've done is we just did a sign-on letter to support full funding for an act that passed in Congress, the Saving Lakes Ecosystems Act. And we just put out an APB to the Business Council and said, hey, who's willing to sign on to this letter? And we had, just over the course of a few days, we had 8, 9, 10 Utah businesses say, yeah, we'll sign on to the letter. And that really helped the trust, who was putting this letter together, have a really nice cross-section of Utah businesses saying, hey, we want full funding for this federal bill, right? Again, allows the businesses to engage how they want to engage. Not out on making representations for them. If they want to sign up, great. If not, that's fine. They can take a pass on any particular initiative, and that's flexibility as part of the process as well. Just to give you a sample of some of the principles that we're working on, and again, this is going out to the Business Council. They're weighing in on it, but these are just some key ideas, right? We want to say, if you're a business that's part of this, this is what you believe. Great Salt Lake sustains Utah's economy and quality of life. The lake faces real and existential threats. We're not just monkeying around. This isn't just fake hyperbole. These are real threats, right? To protect Utah's future, we must protect the lake, and we have an opportunity to lead at so many levels where others have failed. Utah can show the way. That's true, right? Utah is really positioned to lead in a way that interests the world, where so many terminal lakes have winked out, have gone under before sufficient political or other capital could be harnessed to protect them, right? We have the chance to really show how this can be done. And I think most Utah businesses are excited by that kind of thing. And so then there's a whole series, and so I just threw up a couple of samples of things. What do Utah businesses support? Shared responsibility. We all need to do our part. It's not about one group doing something different. We all need to do our part, right? Reasonable target lake elevation ranges and healthy salinity parameter. Oh, I can't even talk this way today. Right? But we need to know what success looks like, so we need to support that. Dedicated water rights for the lake. collaborative, voluntary, market-based solutions. Again, trying to come up with ideas that businesses can say, yes, I support that. Okay, a leader is a dealer of hope. I love that. Hope. What's next? What do we plan to do next? Well, we want to grow the movement. So if you're part of a business, if you own a business, you're part of a business of any size, and you want to join this coalition of businesses, say we care about the lake, just reach out to me and let me know. Give me a point person. I need a name and an email address. And you're all signed up. And we'll put you on, you'll be on the email list. We'll invite you to the Zoom calls. You can learn more information and have opportunities to learn more and to engage. Again, I'd love to see 100, 200 Utah businesses, and then you really start to make a real difference here. Finalize the set of principles that we talked about. Maybe we'll do a press release around those set of principles when we get a little closer. And then outreach to policymakers, which, by the way, in many cases is not a public big statement. It's not a press release. It's not a letter. But it might be a private conversation with a political leader. Just say, hey, this is important. Or here's something we're concerned about. Here's something we really support. And that's where businesses can really have play a profound positive effect. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. So you want to come and take my place and work through some slides?
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I'm definitely not the expert on the Great Salt Lake, but I wanted to share with all of you some of the ways that the lake's changes, how the lake's changes are impacting the ski industry and us as an employer of 1,900 people in the wintertime. And as all of you know, Little Cottonwood Canyon is the catcher's mitt for lake effect snow, and we just crossed the 600-inch mark at Snowbird, and it's been another very good above average year, coming off a record year last year. Personally, I'm a little concerned that 2 back-to-back winters are taking our eye off the ball for some leaders in this state. You know, because the lake is coming up and we're all saying, oh, problem solved, it's all good now. But we are committed in the long term to doing our part as a company operating in the state, trying to better our community, to do what we can, to lend our voice, to lend our money, and lend our influence with policymakers and with all these organizations you heard from that are doing great work around the lake. Most of you in this room understand lake effect, but it's a big deal in Little Cottonwood Canyon. The science claims it can be up to 10% of our snowpack comes from moisture off the Great Salt Lake and gets deposited in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And when the lake kicks in, you can really feel it when you're in the canyon and the snow really starts to come down. This is just one element that is being impacted. If the lake is not full, we get a lot less snow, and obviously the water system in the Wasatch Front is a snowpack-based water system, so if that goes away, we have major problems. But I want to talk about last winter. It was very interesting to go through a winter with 900 inches of snow. There were a lot of times, we reported 838 down at the base, and this was a picture I took on one of the 42 snow nights we had when the road was closed last winter, and by about March, I was thinking to myself, wow, we're going to ski on the 24th of July for the first time. Because we had skied on the 4th of July 3 times in Snowbird's history. And I thought, oh, we have 24th of July in the bag. It was unbelievable. We skied a lot of powder. But yet, what happened? We ended up closing on Father's Day weekend in the middle of June. And the big contributor to that was dust events on the snowpack, melting the snow at a higher rate than we had ever seen in our recorded history in Little Cottonwood Canyon. So we went from the most snow on record in Little Cottonwood Canyon to closing on Father's Day weekend, which we're not getting rich skiing in June and July, I can promise you that. It's a money-losing venture. But it was a great illustration of how all of what's going on here in Utah around dust and hydrology is interlinked. And the snowpack was really obvious. As we get down to that dust layer, the melt is on, and the snow went away very quickly. As I scrambled to put this presentation together, I found this. These are all stolen slides, by the way, off the internet. I should give credit to all of them. And this shows the difference in the snow water equivalent as impacted by the dust storms and what happens to how much water is in the snowpack. So we are seeing it, we're feeling it every day, but beyond just the snow and the water, one of the most impactful things in my relationship with the Great Salt Lake was when the New York Times story came out. And this beautiful person is my wife right here. She moved here 25 years ago from Michigan to ski our amazing snow. And she read this story, and that night at the dinner table, she said to me, "Are we going to be able to stay in Utah? Is it not going to be okay for us to live in Utah and breathe this air and raise our family here?" And I love Michigan, but I don't want to live in Michigan. And so I went to work the next day, and I was in a one-on-one meeting with our HR director, and I told her about the conversation. She said, "I had the exact same conversation with my spouse last night." And as I went around and I talked to our employees, they were all having the same conversation. What is going on here? Are we going to be able to live in Utah in the long term? And I'm constantly recruiting people to come to the state, and I can tell you, what we have going on right here with our air quality is impacting people's interest in living along the Wasatch Front. So it's impacting my home life, my work life from a recruiting and staffing standpoint. It's impacting the air I breathe and the snow I ski. And so as a company here in the state, we feel like we have to get involved. So the first call I made was to Tim on the recommendation of a lobbyist. I said, "Okay, who's the expert on this issue?" And we went to lunch and got educated, and that's really what we're trying to do, is get as educated as we can, and then host forums at Snowbird where our guests and our employees can get educated on the issue and start doing our part. We can start thinking about the money we spend and where it's prioritized. We need to make sure that when we're making snow, we're using the best possible equipment that is wasting the least amount of snow. We figure it's about 18% evaporation when we're making snow, and there's new equipment that will bring that down, so we can have more of the water staying in the watershed and getting down to the Great Salt Lake. We can look at our water usage in our hotels and our buildings, all of our facilities, and continue to chip away at this. But most importantly, we have the ability to talk to a lot of people, because these ski resorts in Utah have these massive social media followings. We have all these passionate customers who come, they're up for the day, or they come here for a week from out of state, and we need to engage all of those people. So we're trying to use our voice and our pocketbook to educate people and share this information. So I think that's all I have.
Is that a truck, by the way, there is around?
Yeah. Yep. And they looked like that yesterday as well. It was great skiing, by the way, this week. So any questions for me before I hand it over to Josh? Oh, sorry.
So it's awesome to be the last person between you and the posters and going home. I'm a Utah native. I followed it a little bit in these slides. So I put these together. Tim said, you did too much, and I agree. So I'm gonna just kind of go through a little bit and try to be concise. Having grown up here, having a very strong love of Utah, and having the knowledge that everything that people in this room are smart enough to know that changes are afoot, I think the state meaning the state leaders or those who are important or believe they are important, recognize things are different, right? So that's an awesome first step because 10 years ago, air quality wasn't an issue. 10 years ago, water was not an issue. So the perception is changing, which is good. How we act and how we complete these tasks to fruition and saving what we do is the crucial step. So just, I'm not gonna read the slide, but go through and change law, as Tim alluded to, takes time and effort. And we had more bills introduced last year, or more bills passed last year than we've had in history. So you just get an idea of what's the number, 591 bills, 45 days. How well can any one legislator get to know all the details? So it gives you an idea of, as Tim said, education is key, and us as a business group truly understands that information is key. As he said, it's crucial to the bottom line, it's fiduciary duty, it's all those items. But the environmental social governance or sustainability or environmentalism has taken root in industry, right? It is part of doing business, and the recognition of working holistically and working together is needed for change and change in a timely fashion. An interesting piece of this session was there was a lot of discussion on the EEOC. So it was an economic group for 2 years where the state went through and looked at how do we change homelessness, water, air, housing, very holistic, let's make the state better. What that also did was, when those ideas came to legislation, they were kind of gone through the system to a point that they probably moved even more readily, more rapidly through the process. They're going to redo this process again, and all of us in this room having a concerted focus on Great Salt Lake is highly important, because I think this helps move some of these bills maybe faster than they would have going through the traditional process, because the eyes had already been seen. Manufacturing is a big portion of these, though, right? I mean, 23.7 billion, you look at the Great Salt Lake, the estimates are around 1.3 billion for extractives. What does that mean to this room? One, there's value in precious metals, critical minerals, rare earths, as well as these companies have a concerted, focused effort to make sure this lake provides and survives for their livelihood. So my experience being involved with the extractors more, having left Kennecott after about 18 years, was they recognize things are different. They recognize the water path is different. They recognize they need to be part of this solution, not a obstacle or something that solves it. Lots of legislation on water, as Tim said, and that's awesome. That's great. We've got people looking at it. There's executive water task force that meet, discuss legislation at the Department of Natural Resources. I sit on Utah Waterways, which is a kind of a U-Care version of water now. Great idea, great things. It's new, it's in its infancy, and there's a variety of other groups, as Tim has alluded to. And these were just ones that I picked that impacted manufacturing, mining, and petroleum. This group went through, these are just a handful of the bills that actually went through on water, environmental pieces on water. So there are a lot more bills being run and focused on water, which is good, and also has some concern and danger on, you're only as smart as what you know, and most people don't have the intricacy and knowledge of water to the level that neighbors will have. The big takeaway, this is, Josh's opinion, is people get it now. That's put a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And again, that can create some pretty bad mills or run things out of the kitchen in a bad way. So everyone needs to be involved. This is holistic. This is brine shrimp. This is farmers up above the lake using the water. This is all of us living here. This is my child. I only got one, and I hope he wants to stay in Utah. And if he does, it needs to be a place that has been as good as it's been for me growing up here. The big piece is synergy, right? We need to work together, and I think the next slide, the big piece I would say, we were involved with the creation of U-Care, and that's 12, 13 years old, I'm guessing. We spent a lot of time and effort saying, how do we help educate people on air without being really that advocacy, lobbying group, just here's the data. The data shall set you free. The data is neutral, it is not biased. And it took time, it took years. I used to sit down with various air environmental groups, and they say, if we work with you, then people won't donate to our associations, our groups. That's not good for them, that's not good for us, that's not good for the whole piece, showing that lots of money going to politics. But once we really started saying, we all have to give, it's a horrible line I hate that the legislature always says, sorry, Tim, is, it's a good bill and nobody likes it. All parties have it. And there's a bit of truth in it. Everybody's got to give. They probably don't get what they get completely, but it's moving in that right direction. Because we can stymie ourselves and slow the progression to the point of being right, and being right for all the right reasons, you can't get things done. So my take, and having been an engineer who did not know policy and probably still doesn't very well, after 14 years of doing this, when people work together, things happen. And that's kind of the takeaway with me on this. In the business industry is, I absolutely believe they know and want to be involved, and all of us holistically all need to work and do timely, data-educated steps. So we're going to go into questions, and we'll let you go after that.
Any burning questions? Here's the death.
Here we go. From the extraction and like a royalties paid to the state, would it help if the industry was more transparent, or maybe there was additional policy to show the value? Like, while you say that there's $1 billion coming from the extraction industry, $500,000 of that, $1 million of that goes to the state in terms of general revenue. So the extraction industry does help a lot with operations on the lake. Just do you have any thoughts about maybe what the business forum here could do to advertise that and help people be aware of the royalties that are paid or not paid?
Are you coming off of this, they're not paying their appropriate share and they should be paying more, or would it be good to educate people on what they do?
No, just what they currently pay, just so people are aware that there is a value given back to the people of Utah from the lake and the extraction.
Yeah, I think that's a fair piece. Most of these come out in their, if they're a publicly traded company, that information's out, but is it readily available, and are you and I looking at it? Probably not. So I would imagine, and I can't speak for the extractors, I don't see that as something that they would not be open to do.
Let me hit it just a little bit too. Some of the numbers that you can trace and some of the things that we have done. So right now, some chunk or some percentage, I think, of the mineral royalties goes into the Sovereign Lands Management account. We had a big appropriation, I think $5 million went to the Great Salt Lake Commissioner this year. That was money that was generated by the mineral companies from their extraction. I passed a bill before I left that said, hey, if you generate money from lithium, right now there's nobody generating significant quantities of lithium, but if you start generating lithium, that actually goes into a lockbox for water supply for the lake. So those are some things where there is a fair degree of transparency where you can see how much is paid. And not only that, but I appreciate that a lot of my colleagues in the legislature appreciated that we said, listen, if the lake is generating the revenue, well then, for crying out loud, let's make sure that the lake benefits. Let's protect the goose that's laying the golden egg. And there's a lot more that we could do there, but we have taken some important first steps.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Dave, for stepping up and providing a leadership example of supporting the concept of the Great Salt Lake Business Council. Aren't we hoping to get the Winter Olympics in whenever, 2034 or something? So we have 10 years that we can really demonstrate our stamina, determination, persistence, and achievement, if you will. And I was thinking, that's a part of the whole, as it relates to certainly the ski industry, is the relationship of the lake effect, and just, keeping the wheels on the wagon, as Tim would say.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When I started at Snowbird in 2000, I was the assistant director of public relations, and it was my job to host media that were writing stories about Utah. And at that point, most people in the world couldn't find Utah on a map. But with the Olympics comes a tremendous spotlight, and I think that spotlight will be very helpful because it's positive stories and it's negative stories, and nobody involved in leadership in the state wants the story to be that the air quality is so bad you can't live in the Olympic host city. So I think you'll see a lot of energy exerted over the next decade, making sure that we have air quality in the lake in as good a position in February of 2034 as possible. So I think it's a real opportunity.
Awesome. And one other thing, having been at the Cliff Lodge lately, and I was inspired thinking, okay, the lake effect, you're at the top of the watershed and that relationship between, the Wasatch and the lake. Perhaps having some Great Salt Lake art and the Cliff Lodge
I love it.
inspirational, and having it kind of as a mainstay to keep, people will say, well, why? Or maybe they won't say, they'll say, of course you would have Great Salt Lake up here, because, there is that connectivity.
I love it.
Hello, thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. I really appreciate being here in the presentation. I am unfamiliar with the capacities of snow generating machines, and I imagine mountain terrain is a barrier, but I'm wondering if there is any realistic way to sort of recover the dust after dust events to mitigate some of that excess snow melt.
I'm sure there are people in this room who can answer that question. I do not know the answer about dust recovery. There's definitely a lot of support these days for enhancing the moisture that's in the air to create snow, but I do not know about dust recovery. Maybe Jim.
I think his name was Otto, is that correct? They were pointing like he knows the answer, so I used to be an engineer, wasn't very good, now I do government, so tell me if I'm somewhat right on this. I believe you could rapidly, you could snow machine cover it or snowfall cover it. The issue is when it gets to that level and those particles become exposed, they have a higher radiation and they're able to absorb heat, and that will further combine and lead to quicker melting than usual.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks for your time and attention. I love the thought about the Olympics. It really does give us an opportunity. And what's cool is we can tell that story, right? We can determine whether that's a positive story about Utah really leading out on this, or it's kind of on us if we fail there. Anyway, thanks gentlemen. Thanks everybody.